Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Pick Up and Play podcast. My name is DJ Switch, and for many years I've been the DJ and MC for the Portland Retro Gaming Expo. Today, my guest is Jay from the Square Pegs YouTube channel, and we're going to have a conversation about sports titles. We're going to have a conversation about some of our favorite games to relax to, as well as some of our favorite games to play when we were growing up. But we're also going to talk about his time at EA, during the time when EA was putting out some of the best and most interesting sports titles. This was a fantastic conversation that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I hope you enjoy as well. My conversation with Jay from Square Pegs. Jay, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course. So your YouTube channel is called Square Pegs.
Yep.
And we're going to get into that in just a minute, but I think I need to wind it back a little bit. You used to work for EA?
I did. I worked for Electronic Arts Tiburon in Orlando, Florida. I started
The Shark?
Yeah, the Shark. In fact, our mascot was a hammerhead shark. And
Nice.
we used to do different designs based on what sport it was. So we had one that looked like a football. It was like this weird, like shark body horror thing that was on the different floors that we had in our building. But
Yikes.
yeah, I started March 10th, 2003, which is my wife's birthday.
Okay.
And then I was there through just about the end of 2009. I did about 6.5 years there. Loved it. Shipped some really incredible titles, but really happy to not be in the industry anymore because it can be an unforgiving industry to be a part of.
So you were there through like what was that, the 5th gen, the 360 and the...
Yeah. I started
PS3?
PS2, Xbox, GameCube was my first batch of stuff.
Okay.
The first game I worked on was NCAA 2004 on the GameCube.
Okay.
And then I closed out. The last thing I shipped was NFL Arcade on the PS3 and the 360.
Man, so that must have been wild.
It was. It was.
So you're in Florida, you're working for EA, you're shipping these big sports titles. Your biggest video on your channel right now is a rundown of all the EA Sports. Is it EA Sports Big?
It was all the kind of like alternative takes on sports or the extreme sports stuff. So it was like SSX Tricky, Def Jam, Fight for New York, stuff like that.
So all my favorite sports games then.
All the good ones, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So and I know in the video you mentioned like there was a couple that you worked on that were part of that brand?
Yeah, I worked on the first NFL Street. That was the only EA big proper game I worked on, but I also worked on NFL Arcade, which was basically the same engine and the same idea. It was just prettied up because the NFL didn't want to have a street football game anymore. So
yeah,
it was very sterile. It's a fun game, but it was it didn't have the personality that the street games did, unfortunately.
Yeah, the arcade style stuff always appealed to me way more than the sort of simulation style stuff. I get the appeal of Madden. I get the appeal of like an NBA 2K or you know those when the guys that are looking for the more realistic type of experience. But for me, it was always NFL Blitz, NFL Street, NBA Street. The ones that were so arcadey and ridiculous, and you couldn't help but just smile even as you were getting your skull bashed in or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Like for me, it was a case of like, I can shoot a basketball, but I can't play basketball.
Right.
So if I'm going to play a basketball video game, I want to do like, 720 tomahawk dunks, 30 feet up in the air to go through the backboard. And, same thing with snowboarding. I was like, SSX is one of my favorite series. And it's like, if I get on a snowboard, both my legs are broken. Yeah. But if I play it in the video game, I want to do all these crazy tricks and I want to have fireworks going off when I go over a hill. Like that's what I need. And those games were just, they were perfect. It was kind of lightning in a bottle because it was a chance for developers to kind of step out of the sterile side of shipping a Madden, shipping a NASCAR, shipping an NBA Live and doing something different and fun. And they're just perfect games to me. Just so much fun.
What was your favorite?
SSX Tricky.
Sorry. No, let me rephrase the question.
Okay.
Because you mentioned SSX Tricky, but like what was your favorite title to work on, and like what became your favorite sport as a result of your time working on those
Well,
titles?
I think my favorite thing to work on was not necessarily from EA Big, because I only did 2 of them, but I shipped
Mm,
like 30 games in my 6.5 years there. My favorite thing to work on was Fight Night Round 3,
okay.
uh, which we did with EA Sports Chicago, which is a studio that's no longer open.
Yeah.
Um, but it was we had an incredible test team that I was in charge of for the 360, and the PS3. We had an incredible development team. The game was pretty much picture perfect from start to finish. Like there wasn't anything about that experience I would have changed. Um, as far as big goes, it was NFL Street that I worked on, because that was the first time we'd done anything like that at our studio. So it was special. It was something cool.
Were you part of the like ideation process? Did you like was that like
Not
who cooks up a crazy idea like that?
That's typically your producers and your lead designers will come up with
Okay.
stuff like that. So,
Okay.
your the EP will have an idea of a feature set he wants to have going into the game. And at EA, they do a thing called milestone, which is where they start laying out the design and they do all the planning based around. It's like, all right, so if we're going to do the ones that stick out in my head was NASCAR, because I worked on NASCAR for 4 years. So those are the ones I remember the most vividly. But they would do things like, okay, so we're going to do 16 racers online this year as opposed to our typical 4. So what does that look like? We need to make sure that we're doing our pit stops, or we need to turn off pit stops, because that's a lot to sync up between the different devices and things like that. So it was a lot of that, and those 5 months of milestone, because we do milestones 1 through 5, was really kind of the stepping stone of how the game was designed and built. And then when we got to alpha, it was a sprint to the end, because alpha was 8 weeks long. And then we had usually 2 weeks of beta before we went gold.
Okay. And in those days, it was a lot of crunch. It was a lot of get this thing shipped, because you were still
Yeah.
doing physical discs, and
Yep.
it wasn't as much of a thing to like patch it after the fact, right?
Well, we could do patches, but you only got one patch for free.
Oof.
It had to be under a certain size limit, which I don't remember the exact size now, but it was not big. It was under a gigabyte.
Okay.
Um, and the entire process was the crunch was so bad is because we had to get it right the first time. Um, so it was very regular to work 100-hour weeks to get a game done. There were plenty of days where we would ship a game where I would do 24 to 32-hour shifts just to get the game out the door to make sure it was delivered in time.
Now,
Um,
was that a limitation of the platform? Like, was it Xbox saying, "Hey, you can only have one patch for free," or was it?
that was an Xbox thing. Yeah, I don't
Okay.
remember what Sony did. I only shipped a few Sony titles on the PS3, and I don't really remember that. I did a lot of stuff with 360, but at the time it was you got one patch for free, and then it was thousands of dollars after that if you wanted to do another one. So
Gotcha. Yeah, around that time I was in college slash post college as a games journalist, and I didn't actually work for a game studio until like years later. And it was a mobile studio. So like by that point, the whole industry was just vastly different.
yeah,
So I'm trying to kind of piece together in my head, like from my perspective, working for a studio, and what my relationship was like with my producers, and yeah, it sounds like some things were the same back then, but some things were very different. Just
it it was an interesting time to be there, because we went through a distinct evolution over
mm,
in the 6.5 years I was there. Because when we started, QA was persona non grata.
mm,
They didn't care about us. We were just there.
yeah.
By the end of it, though, like we were actually like sitting on the floor with the development team and working directly with them as they're going through design and planning, because they realized, oh, if we move all this stuff upstream and we actually have them look at it as we're designing it, maybe we won't ship as many bugs every game. And it was really nice to be part of that kind of evolution at EA, because it was we got really used to it being us against them for a long time, and then
Yeah.
the last year and a half, it was a really positive experience. So
Man, so I take it that you're not at EA anymore.
no, no.
What are you doing these days?
I actually work. I'm still in software testing. I'm the QA lead at a company called Third Iron,
Mm,
and we develop library software. It is
okay.
significantly less exciting, but I get all my weekends off, and I get to spend time with my wife and my kid every day. So it's an excellent trade off, and I like playing games again. And that's the best part, because it was after years and years and years of crunch. Like that first year after I left,
Yeah.
I didn't want anything to do with any games. Uh, it was really hard to see the silver lining and the enjoyment for what they were worth, and then I just got back to it, and now it's my passion. It's what I love. So.
You got out before the rise of the microtransaction and
Yes. um, I do remember when we were talking about them though, because
uh
that was a last year I was there. We were starting to talk. It's like, do you think maybe we could charge for like extra uniforms? And we're like, no, no one will ever do that. Why would they do that? And well, there you go. It's just the way the industry works now.
Fortnite.
Yep.
So here we are a few years later. You start up a YouTube channel.
Yep.
I take it. I'm assuming, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming the YouTube channel was part of your journey as a collector, or is it the other way around?
Uh, oh boy, little from A, little from B. If I'm being
Mm,
completely honest with you, so the YouTube channel actually started because I've worked from home now since 2015.
okay.
So I've been a remote employee now for God, it'll be 10 years next year. So
Oh,
I realized in 2019, my wife and I went out to dinner with a bunch of friends of ours, and I had a panic attack because all of a sudden I got in my head, I don't know how to talk to people anymore because I'm not around them in an office. I'm not interacting with them directly. Uh,
okay.
and somewhere in that, I got the idea in my head, if I can talk to a camera, I can talk to a person. So I started the YouTube channel in it was, I want to say, August of 2019. I did 2 videos. I looked like I was in a hostage negotiation, just kind of like, blink twice if you're okay, and like promptly forgot about the channel. I was like, okay, I did it. I'm fine. Everything's okay. Um, and put it on a shelf and just said, you know what? I tried it. It wasn't for me. And then the world shut down in 2020. And now
Yeah.
no one was working or no one was going out. Everyone was working from home. And I was like, well, I mean, I guess I can try it again. And it was talking to Riggs and a few other people, Gary from Rock Solid Productions, my friend Chris, who runs the Game Dad show. And I had, gosh, I think 110 subscribers. And then in April or May of 2020, I was just like, all right, I'm going to take it seriously. I'm going to do 2 videos a week. And that's been the cadence ever since. So,
Okay. So uh you start pumping out these videos. You start trying to figure out like what works and what doesn't.
yep.
The whole time you're collecting games.
Yep.
At what point do things like start to click and things start to move for you? Because I'm sure there was like subscribers trickling in a little bit, but it
There
seems like
was.
you've got a few videos that really kind of took off.
Well, it was so the biggest year for the channel uh was kind of the tail end of 2022 into 2023.
Okay.
So there's a channel called Gaming Off the Grid, who does every month they will feature a channel that they like. And in
Oh, okay.
August they featured me in 2022, and I had no idea. Like I had no idea they even knew who I was.
Oh, wow.
Um, but a friend of mine messaged me. He goes, "Oh my god, dude, you're on this month's Gaming Off the Grid video." I was like, "What the hell are you talking about? Why am I on there? What did I do? Oh crap!" Um, and then I
Okay.
saw it, and I was like, my subs started ticking up, and I went from I think about 1,200 to 3,000 in about a month and a half. And then at the end of 2022, they featured me again as the channel of the year, and that pushed me at like 11:49 p.m. on New Year's Eve to 4,000 subscribers, which was my pie in the sky goal for 2022. Is like if I can get to 4,000, that's a fantastic year.
Okay. And
And
that's Robert and Wes.
Robert and Wes, yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And I hit that on New Year's Eve, and it was like, all right, this is great, this is fantastic. And then things settled down again. Um, but in February of last year, the EA Big video took off,
Mm,
and kind of out of nowhere. Like I didn't do anything to promote it. I put the video out in December. I let
right.
it ride, and it just did nothing for a month and a half. And then all of a sudden, I got couple 100,000 views on it in like a month, and I was like, what the hell is happening here? And it gets 500 views a day. Like it continues to pull in views. So
some 15-year-old on TikTok says, hey, do you guys
Yep.
remember that NFL street game? And then all of a sudden every YouTube video about it just
Yep. And it's got to be something like that. And you know what? I'll take it. So it's
yeah, that's been one of the kind of weird changes for this show. I started podcasting in 2009. I'd been DJing long before that, but when I started podcasting in 2009, it was like I had to have somebody hand build my crappy WordPress site, and I had to host all my own shows on my own server, and I was lucky to get like 1,000 listeners or something. Like it was nothing compared to the social media stuff we have now, YouTube and TikTok and all it, like the engines that sort of drive those algorithms and stuff.
Yeah.
Just didn't exist back then. So yeah, it's weird to think about like content creating now, and like especially cross-platform content creating. Cause this show, I'm cutting together shorts to try and like promote and sort of drive people to the video version of the show, which is going to exist on YouTube, but also the audio. Like I'm just straight stripping the audio, and I'm going to be putting it out on all the audio platforms because it is a podcast. So like, as I'm going through my post-production process, I'm no longer thinking about like uploading an MP3 to a server somewhere. I'm thinking about like 5 or 6 different platforms that need 3 different file format types of all the same show. It's weird.
Yeah, I was contented for a long time to just be YouTube and just be long form content, and that was going to be it. That was my entire focus. I wasn't going to do anything else. And this past October, I started doing shorts every day. I was like, I'm going to do this. So I started doing short form videos, and I was like, well, I can post those on TikTok too, I guess. I kind of forget about that platform. Well, if I put it on TikTok, I can do it on Instagram. Well, yeah. I can do that on Facebook too. I should probably put that on Threads. And it's like, Jesus, now it's just this process of like, I've got to run through my checklist. And it's like, all right, did I put it in the 9 places it need to be? Okay, good.
Yep. So the checklist for every single recording.
Yep.
Did I put it here? Did I put it here? Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what it is now. Like, there's no one platform that like I guess you can just stick to YouTube and you're going to get, a certain kind of result from that. And then, but if you want to grow, I've noticed this because I started streaming in 2020. I had done the YouTube thing a little bit, and I did go back to the YouTube thing for a while, in 2020/21. But really it was, I streamed for like 3 years straight, starting in March of 2020. And, I learned kind of brutally that streaming on Twitch, you won't get discovered unless you're popular already. Yeah. And the only way to drive people to that is literally post anything on any other platform outside of Twitch. I mean, I would post JPEG Facebook flyers for my Twitch streams on my just on my Facebook wall, and people would respond to that more than anything I was doing as a streamer. So yeah, it's weird how the internet has become this weird sort of amorphous blob of like everything is content, but nothing is sacred.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, streaming is that one part of the one piece of the puzzle I haven't picked up yet. I tried it when I first started the channel. I apologize for the train going by in the background if you can hear it, but
how dare you?
I tried it like right when I started the channel, and I was just like, oh God, I hate this. I do not enjoy this at all. It was, I admire people who do it. Like I'll watch Riggs will just be like, oh, I'm doing a live stream. And I'm like, okay. And I get anxiety watching it. Cause I'm like, oh God, there's so many people talking.
But, it's funny. I started DJing in like 1998, right? I was 14 years old. And, from that point on, I was training as a professional MC, learning how to address a crowd full of people, whether it was at a wedding or a high school dance or a prom or a corporate event or whatever. Like I'm the guy on the microphone in those rooms. and it's anywhere from, 10 people to 1,000 plus, like whatever it is, I had to learn how to competently handle myself on a microphone in those situations. Cut to 20 years later, I decided to turn on a camera, and it was like I was starting all over. Like, I swear I thought that I was going to have some kind of edge going into it with that kind of, background as an MC and like an event host. No, none of it translated. I was still stiff. I was still stuttering. I was still having the hardest time being able to conduct myself on a camera because it's just such a different animal. So I only say that to say this. Don't feel bad, man. Like,
okay.
it takes time. It takes, patience. But you'll get there. Everybody gets there eventually, sort of at their own pace. The only thing that you can't do is quit.
Sure. That's true. That's a very good point.
That being said, Riggs is also a radio professional.
Yep, that's true.
And he's been doing that longer than I have. So, it's a little unfair.
Maybe a bit. And talking to John is the first time I met him, it was like talking to someone I've known for 20 years. It was like, oh, everyone's John's best friend, and he treats everyone the same. So it was like, oh, okay, I can see why he's a natural at this.
Yeah, I've known him for a long time, and spoiler alert to anybody that checked out episode 2 with John Riggs. The version that I put up on YouTube is around an hour or so long. Well, at this point, I haven't launched anything yet. This is going to be the first part of the first batch that I'm going to be launching with. So, when I will have launched the show, everyone will be able to see sort of an hour-ish long version of my conversation with John Riggs as episode 2 of this podcast on YouTube. Or they'll see the nearly 2-hour version that's on the Patreon. Because he and I, once we started talking, like my wife was legit mad at me when I got off of that record. She's like, "You've been in there for 2 hours." I'm like, "I'm sorry." John and I like to hang out and chat a lot.
I'm familiar with that one. I've had that conversation with my wife when John Hancock and I did something together. It was like, oh, I'll be down there for like 45 minutes. I came up 3 hours later. She's like, "Did you fall asleep?" I was like, "No, I'm sorry. I was talking to my friend. I'm sorry."
The play date was going well. Like,
exactly.
What are you gonna do? Speaking of play dates, man, that was my next question for you. Was like, I know that you mentioned SSX Tricky was one of your favorites from those days, but like, what are you playing right now, and why is it on the Switch?
I do play a lot on the Switch. But honestly, the thing I have put the most time into recently was Spider-Man 2 on the PS5.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, like before video games, before anything, comic books were my thing. And I never, outside of like the Arkham games, I never really got a feel of I am this superhero. I am this character. I can lose myself in this game. The first Spider-Man game, I would literally, like, because I have insomnia, and nights where I couldn't sleep, I'd boot up the PS4 and I just swing around New York for an hour because it was relaxing.
You're talking about the Spider-Man, the more recent. Who is it that's producing those? Is that Insomniac?
That's Insomniac.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So the first one that came out in 2018, I think.
Okay.
I would get up and I'd just be like, I can't sleep. I'm just going to go swing around New York for a little while. It was relaxing. I could do that, just kind of lose myself a little bit because you got the sound of the wind as you're going. It was really immersive. And I rolled with it for that. And then Miles Morales was also excellent game, but Spider-Man 2, when that dropped, it was like, all right, I'm gonna get this and Mario Wonder on the same day, and I'm probably gonna play Mario Wonder first. And I played Mario Wonder, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And then I booted up Spider-Man, and then I lost 70 hours of my life just playing that, and not rushing through the game or anything, just playing, just swinging around, stopping crime, not progressing the story whatsoever. But
you woke up 3 days later realizing you really needed to pee, right?
More or less. Yeah. More or less. But I knew the layout of New York City and Queens intimately well. Like I could get you from Astoria to Coney Island without a problem.
I had that with the PS2 version of Spider-Man 2 back in the day. I still contend that was like that game was so far ahead of its time.
It
And
really
what was
was.
weird was I played every Spider-Man game after that, up to and including Miles Morales. I don't have a PS5 yet. I, you know, still can't get one.
Sure.
Still like part of that struggle. So like once I grab one, I will definitely be booting up Spider-Man 2. But um, it was that first Insomniac Spider-Man game that was the first time I felt that way since Spider-Man 2 on the PS2.
Yeah,
Um,
Spider-Man 2 on the PS2 was my favorite up until that Insomniac drop.
yeah,
Like
exactly,
I'd
exactly.
enjoyed the other ones. They were fun, they were fine, but they
Sure.
didn't have they didn't have the right soul. It was too much a game with a Spider-Man skin as opposed to this Spider-Man in a video game setting. It was and yeah, Spider-Man 2 on PS2 is just legit such a great game.
Yeah, it's so hard to get that immersion right, and it's so hard to get the rhythm of the swing and
Yep.
the sort of natural feeling of like swinging and falling and then swinging again.
Yep.
I think I mean I completely understand where you're coming from. It's so it is really calming and relaxing. But that's part of that's actually part of the plan for this show is that I want to encourage people to throw this on while they're playing a video game and
Yeah.
have something to listen to while they're swinging around New York or while they're
Absolutely.
grinding out all of those extra collectibles on Lego Star Wars. Which, by the way, that reminds me, I got a bone to pick with you, sir.
Okay.
Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga is the greatest Lego Star Wars game, and how dare you besmirch it in your video?
I it's still my least favorite. It really is. Like I look at everything that they've done
Yeah,
and it's good. Like it's I'm saying it's the worst one. That's like saying it's my least favorite child, you know. It's
right.
still I still love it. It's still great. I am just I'm such a sucker for those first two, and
Yeah,
I love the Clone Wars one as well. I love the Clone Wars cartoon, so I was just kind of naturally drawn to that one. But yeah, the
yeah.
first two, the complete saga, is it's so hard for me to top that one. It's such a great it's nostalgia. I know it's rose colored glasses looking back at it, but
My relationship with those games, you know, I spent a good chunk of time in college playing uh the complete saga. So, for anyone that's not familiar, there was a Lego Star Wars the complete saga back in the day that covered like the first 6 movies,
yeah,
and then they kept making movies, and so they had to
yes,
keep making games. uh, but the complete saga back in the day for the DS, I would pop that in. I would throw on a podcast, and that was sort of like my introduction to podcasts. Is I would listen
nice.
to the Kevin Smith podcast, and for just hours while I'm like grinding away on every little like completionist thing on that game. That was the first game I like truly 100%ed in
That's
the
awesome.
era of 3D games. Before that, it had only been like the old 2D stuff. Um, and so like there have definitely been hits and misses in that series since then. But that was your criticism of like how many things there are to collect in that game is exactly why I fell in love with it,
Sure,
because I finally was back to being able to put on something to listen to and then just grinding
I
and
can get
just
that.
sort of like crawling into my hole for a couple of hours and really just, you know, immersing myself that way.
I can totally get that. So that's it's interesting because I when you're talking about that, I was like, yeah, I didn't like that because it was so much game
Yeah.
because it was a lot to really take in. And I'm thinking about it as like that's kind of the way because this doesn't work right all the time and it
Right.
doesn't organize things very well. I'm usually playing like 5 or 6 games at the same time. I hardly ever complete a game.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things I noticed this year was like as much as I love Tears of the Kingdom, as much as I loved Baldur's Gate 3, and both of them are absolutely brilliant titles, they were too much for me to be able to just sit down and play because I would, and I put in like 80 hours, and I'm like, I've gotten nowhere. And it's a victim of my own brain. So it was stuff that had very tangible start and finishes to me that really kind of to start to leap to the front of the line over the last few years, like Spider-Man 2 or Super Mario Brothers Wonder, or an RPG that I know where the story ends. I can keep going. Like Super Mario RPG this year, I absolutely loved. It was so nice to be able to play that again, but I knew the finite limits of what the game was. It wasn't just this and go play.
Right.
Get out.
It's also like a 40-ish hour game if you take
Something
your time
like
with
that.
it, versus, I know people that are dumping 400 hours plus into Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah.
So it's a completely different animal, and I don't think that that's going to get better. I think as games continue to get bigger and more elaborate, and teams continue to produce more elaborate content for these RPG games, like I noticed that too, because like Tears of the Kingdom, I jumped on it right when it came out, and I actually had to there was several games that came out while I was playing Tears of the Kingdom that I was like, I had to make note, like, I want to go back and play these, and some of them I still haven't, just because I decided, like, no, I want to finish Tears of the Kingdom. And it became like this almost like this value exchange. Like,
Sure.
I could finish Tears of the Kingdom, or I could play these other games, but not both.
Yeah.
And as someone like yourself that likes to play a lot of different kinds of games, man, like, it gets tiring to have to make that call all the time.
Yeah, I agree. And I get in this kind of weird mental state where I start to feel bad that I'm making that call, where it's like, why do I feel bad about this? It's my time. It's no one else's time. I should do with my time what is best for me. But yeah, it would be a case of, I don't know what I want to play. And it was kind of analysis paralysis, right? Where I'm like,
Yeah.
I really want to play Zelda, but I'm kind of tired of having to play Zelda. Like, because I feel like I feel like I have to at this point.
Yeah.
And not that it's a bad game. It's a spectacular game, and I've got probably 80 hours into it at this point. But it just got to the point where it's like, I need to do something else for a little while.
Yeah.
And that was the same thing with Baldur's Gate. Like, I'm a old school D&D fan. I've been playing since AD&D back in 1992.
Oh wow.
So anytime there's a D&D game, I'm like, yep, I'm on it. I got to play it. And I loved Baldur's Gate 1, and I loved Baldur's Gate 2.
Isn't that when they had was it THACO?
Yep.
Yeah.
Hit armor class 0. There we are.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was so excited when Baldur's Gate 3 got announced, and I got it, and I fell it was so great. And I remember coming upstairs that, like, the first night I played it, and my wife's like, just go play. I know you want to. You've been chomping at the bit all weekend to play it. And I came up at the end of the night, and I was like, I love it, and I kind of hate it at the same time, because I can already tell that I'm going to be dissatisfied with some choice I make, and that's going to impact everything I do, and I'm going to want to start over. And, like, sure as anything, like 2 weeks later, I was like, I did something wrong. I need to start over. That's impacted choices. That's impacted storyline, and I can't do that.
Folks, I want to thank you again for hanging out today and enjoying this conversation with Jay from Square Pegs. If you have an opportunity, please make sure that you check out all of the other social channels where I'll be putting up content, including my TikTok channel, my YouTube channel, my Instagram. All of that is available at DJ Switch PDX on all those platforms. And of course, I do have a Patreon where you can find bonus content for this episode and all of my other episodes. That's patreon.com/DJ Switch PDX. The more folks support the Patreon, the more folks support the content that I'm putting up on these other platforms, the closer and closer I get to being able to make this a full-time opportunity, and I can start making even more content and even more diverse content for the retro gaming space and beyond. So I want to thank you all very much for taking the time to listen. I want to thank you all very much for taking the time to support what I'm doing. And now let's get back to the second half of my conversation with Jay from Square Pegs. I played 20 minutes of World of Warcraft.
Okay.
Total.
I will not comment on how much World of Warcraft I played.
Because I knew back then, I was like, oh, this is a problem.
Yes.
I can't do this. And then it was like I don't know, maybe a year or two after World of Warcraft, just like World of Warcraft kind of like hit the ground running. It was big right
Yeah.
from the jump. But I didn't realize how big it was until I was doing an assignment in Spokane, Washington. I was like in a mall on an elevator with my big ass camera over my shoulder. Cause I was still like, I was shooting digital, but I was still shooting digital on like big, huge Nikon lenses and stuff back then. So like, working for a newspaper, like it was always weird being a photographer for a newspaper because no one wondered what you were doing. Like you had the big ass camera around, over your shoulder. And so I'm on an elevator, or an escalator. I've got a hat that says AFK, and I've got a camera over my shoulder. And this girl's like, "Hey, do you play World of Warcraft?" And I go, "Oh no, I play like a lot of other stuff though." And she goes, "Oh," and then like that was the end of the conversation. She was only interested in talking to me about World of Warcraft. And like I kind of think back on that moment and like kind of realize that like World of Warcraft became such an addiction for so many people. It became such a problem for so many gamers that it almost like split the world of gaming. It was like either you played World of Warcraft or you weren't cool.
Yeah, I can tell you a lot of the problems that it caused because that came out right when I was at EA, and we would lose hours. We're gonna run a dungeon over lunch, and all of a sudden it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's like, oh no, okay, we should really get back to work. But there's a lot of games like that that happened like that. There was World of Warcraft, Rock Band. Oh my God, when Rock Band launched, there was nothing happened in our QA department for a week when Rock Band launched. It was awful.
I was at Xbox. I worked at Xbox in their support team for a little while, and we had a bunch of Xboxes set up in the break room, and I was there when Rock Band Beatles came out.
Oh, yes.
And
my favorite one.
And I got myself in trouble taking a little too much advantage of our lunch policy.
Nice.
So I'm right there with you, man. Like I know how that goes. So let's get back to talking about the channel though, because like
sure, yeah,
like it was Riggs that gave me your name and kind of tipped me off, said, "Hey man, you should talk to this guy." I go and I check out the channel. You've got several videos where you're doing like you've got like class rankings, like where you're kind of like, and those seem to be doing well for you. But then I watched this video. It was your New Year's video where you're kind of setting goals for yourself for the new year. You mentioned that this is like what, year number 4 for you, really?
Yeah. It's, I think it might technically be number 5, but that first year was like 3 videos, and they're best not to be spoken of. Whenever someone comments on one of them, I'm like, I can't believe you watched that, and I apologize. They're much better now. So.
I technically, I think I uploaded my first YouTube video in like 2009, and no one will ever see it because it's gone now. But yeah, I'm with you there. So you set some goals for yourself, and what's like, what was that process like for you? Like what, I know you're like creeping up on 10K. That's one of the big ones, right? What are you thinking about going into? Cause this is, we're about halfway through January as we're recording this. It will probably be the end of January when this goes out to the public. So, in this first month or so, like how's that going? And what are you trying to tackle first, do you think?
Well, the main thing I'm trying to, the goal process kind of stems from being an analytics nerd. Just it's the nature of my job in QA is I'm always looking at numbers, always looking at projections and things like that,
performance, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's something where, because the YouTube analytics are so robust, it's real easy to look at it and say, okay, this is where I need to improve. This is where I need to adapt. This is where I should probably put a little more focus. so the entire goal process was just like, these are attainable goals, because it's real easy to say, I want to have 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. But that's a pipe dream. I'm not going to get to 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. If I do, great. I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to give those subscribers back. But it's something where I believe in making attainable goals that are still a goal. You know, it's one thing to say, I'm going to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I'm going to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of February. You know, I know that. I can see the way my channel's moving. I know that's going to happen. But it's something else for me to say, I want to be at 15,000 by the end of the year, because I'm in a weird spike right now, just because Riggs shouted me out at the end of the year. And I know that a lot of the growth right now is because of that. And I recognize that. I usually do about 280 to 325 subscribers a month. I think by the end of the year, 15,000 is a realistic goal. And it'd still be a bit of a challenge, because it's not a guarantee, because I could have an off month. I could, tank something, and all of a sudden I'm going to start hemorrhaging subscribers or viewers. And that's kind of what I look at it in that regard, is it's a way to have a reason to keep making the videos, because it's all well and good to make them, but if they're just being made for the sake of making them, then
right,
why do it? But I mean, it's, anyone that makes YouTube videos, and I think I said this in that video, was the subscriber goal is great, because subscribers are the things that get you sponsorships. Those are the things that get you invited to shows.
Sure.
Because that number is really easy to show off and be like, hey, 10,000, that's 5 digits. That's
right.
A big deal. But
yeah,
it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. And that was something that was really hard for me to kind of wrap my head around at first, because it is that thing that everyone chases, because that's part of the monetization side of things, is you need the subs. And I don't really care about that now. Like, I'm glad I have them. I love my subscribers. I have a great community around me, and the people that tend to follow me tend to be pretty level-headed and enjoyable to talk to. But the most important thing for me is that the videos I do, they watch. And they don't just watch for 20 seconds and then click off. I get really good engagement time. And I get good view rates for the amount of subscribers I have. I get good number of views on my videos.
Yeah.
So those are the things that are important to me, is to continue to, kind of foster that sense of community with the people I have. I try to respond to as many comments as possible on my videos to make sure that, my viewers feel engaged just beyond, this is an interesting video. Because if someone feels moved enough to watch the video and then comment either angrily or happily on something that I've done, there's an emotional attachment there. And those are the people I need to engage with and I need to talk to, because if I make a connection that way, they're going to keep coming back. And those are the people I want to have coming back, because they're interested enough to talk. So,
no, it's really nice when you're able to build out the quality of your subscriber versus the quantity. Because a lot of people, when they talk about quality versus quantity, oftentimes I see those conversations kind of happening around like content. Like you need to be making a lot of content, but also it needs to be quality content, because you need people to want to care about that content.
Yep.
And if you're going to experience any kind of growth at all, and having spent so many years performing in front of real people in real rooms, I know that the quality versus quantity conversation also happens with the people who are consuming that content.
Yep.
If you have quality subscribers, they stick around, like yours, and watch the whole video and leave comments and engage and converse with you, versus a situation I ran into where I was doing reaction videos. I reacted to like one singer out of Asia who has this incredible voice. He's incredibly talented, but he's got this incredibly sycophantic fan base that didn't care about anything else I was posting. And I straight up removed the video. Even though it was like my top performing video, I just straight up removed it, because they were tanking my channel by not watching anything else I was posting.
Yep.
And once this podcast goes out, I don't know if I'll still be suffering from that problem of like all of those people not watching my thing. But I'm hoping, you know, I've been away from my channel long enough at this point. I'm hoping that it's all kind of stale and that like
Sure.
I can sort of rebuild. But yeah, that was a really, really harsh lesson for me in the sort of quantity versus quality of subscriber
Yeah.
side of the conversation. I don't really ever see those conversations happening. I think a lot of creators are sort of nervous to talk about their subscribers in those terms.
Sure.
But I feel like, you know, coming from my perspective as an entertainer first, those conversations have to happen because you want that level of transparency with your subscribers in order to draw out those quality subscribers that are going to trust you.
Yeah, I agree. You know, it's definitely a case of, I mean, I think it's everyone recognizes, we're all mature enough to understand that, you know, there's always going to be some video that you think is going to go gangbusters that just doesn't connect.
Yeah.
And the hardest part for me at first was realizing that just because I loved it doesn't mean that everyone's going to love it. And rolling with those punches was really, really hard for me at first.
Like a Star Wars, man, I'm telling you.
um, and it was one of those things where I got to the point where it was like, you know, I need to talk with my own voice. And that was the other thing to grow with was I needed to stop being a clone of John and John or Metal Jesus or anyone else that was doing videos that were the reason I started making them in the first place, and start talking for myself. And a lot of those things, I mean, there's a lot of crossover and we all kind of like the same things. We all kind of like the same games at different times, but my experience with a game is different than someone else's. Like I will talk frequently about my favorite NES games, and I'll bring up Baseball Simulator 1000, and people are like, what? No, why are you a baseball game on the NES? Really? And I'm telling you, I have so many positive memories about this game growing up, you know, playing it with my best friend, David, creating all these ridiculous teams with these, you know, they had, teams where you could give your players superpowers. So you'd have these like rocket powered pitches and be able to jump 100 feet up in the air to catch a fly ball. And these are the things that drove me as a kid to be a gamer, with stuff like that. And sure, I could talk about Super Mario 3. I could talk about Mega Man 2, and I do frequently. Anyone who watches my channels right now is going, you talk about Mega Man all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I always try to cover something that's a little bit different and a little bit off the beaten path, and isn't necessarily something that everyone is going to say. And when you find your voice and you're able to present yourself intelligently and engagingly and you know, humbly, you know, it's great to be Mr. Personality and be cocky and stuff like that, because a lot of people will be drawn into you, but they're not going to keep coming back.
Yeah.
You know, if you're able to be humble about your success and you're able to accept that sometimes you make mistakes and you admit to those mistakes and things like that, then that's going to keep people coming back.
You see it a lot in music. I mean, DJs especially are guilty of this. Hip hop musicians are very guilty of this, but music in general, it's a lot of ego plus cockiness equals what they think is confidence. And it turns out that, especially in the world of like content creating, real confidence has none of that.
Yeah.
And people on the internet are smart, that especially like on YouTube, people on YouTube are smart. They're going to see right through that.
Yep.
And so, you know, that's part of the reason why I had to make the active decision years ago. Like, what do I, you know, I got to a point in my DJ career where I was like, I definitely don't want to keep doing weddings. I was playing nightclubs, but like, I'm not a nightclub guy.
Sure.
And so I had to figure out like where's my people? How do I figure out how to connect with the people that I would want to hang out with if I wasn't working? And then I got booked for like a local pop culture convention where someone from the Retro Gaming Expo saw me and was like, "Hey, you want to come play with a bunch of gamers?" I was like, "Yes."
That's awesome.
And so 2011, I started with the Retro Gaming Expo, and I've been doing it ever since. And like, it's become such a huge part of my brand, my identity, who I am. but at the same time, it was sort of like always who I was as a person, not just as DJ Switch, but like Jeff remembers being 10 years old and peeing himself laughing over the banana peels on Mario Kart, like with my buddy. Like I have those memories, and I'm constantly chasing those memories because I love them so much, and it's such a great feeling when you can even just get close to that.
I did a video, gosh, it was sometime last year. I can't remember when, but it was a video that I called Killer Filler, NES Killer Filler, because I wasn't looking for the give me your top tier game that is like the number one thing for you. It was like I want to hear what's your like $3 bargain bin game that you're going to find on the bottom shelf at a convention under the table. What is that game for you? And I had I think I had 20 people, 20 different creators on with me. And to hear them talk about these games, and it wasn't the rehearsed stuff talking about like, and you should definitely, like, I keep going back to Mario. It was like, you should pick up Super Mario Brothers 3 because it's a transcendent experience and the power-ups are great. Everyone says the same stuff.
Right.
But to hear people get excited about Kabuki Quantum Fighter or Super Dodgeball or something like that, I'm like, this is the stuff I live for. This is the stuff I want to hear about. Like my gaming story, the first game I ever played was Atari Super Football and the Atari 2600. I hate the 2600. It is like my least favorite video gaming experience, but my memory with that is my older cousin Greg, who I worshiped the ground he walked on. And I still do. I mean, I'm going to be honest here, but he wanted to play with me. And that's why I remember it. I don't remember completing a pass. I don't remember doing anything. I just remember my older cousin thought I was cool enough to play football with.
Yeah.
And that's what started it for me. And you know, the entire journey stems from sitting in that bedroom in Portsmouth, Rhode Island on his bed playing Atari Super Football. And that's what brought me here.
I had a Genesis growing up. And I talked kind of at length about that in one of the other episodes. But I had a friend of mine that I had a couple friends that had Super Nintendos. And my best friend growing up had Super Mario World, because who didn't? He had Mario All-Stars, because duh. And then he had Bill Lambier's Combat Basketball.
That's fantastic.
And let me tell you something. We had a lot of fun playing Bill Lambier's Combat Basketball when we needed a break from all things Mario.
Much like you, I was a Genesis kid growing up. And my best friend David had a Super Nintendo, and our break game outside of Super Mario World and Mario Kart and F-Zero sessions was to play NHL 94 on the Super Nintendo.
Yes.
And it was, it was great. Like, that was something we still joke about to this day, because he was a Devils fan. I'm a Boston Bruins fan. I'm from New England originally.
Okay.
And there was a player on his team. I can't remember the guy's full name, but his name was Slava, and we just kept calling him Saliva because we were 13 and laughing like idiots because, his name is Spit. And it was the dumbest crap, but like, I'm never going to forget that. Right. And it's these memories of playing, that game. It's like, that's going to stick with me for my whole life.
Let me tell you something, Jay from Square Pegs. I don't know if you know this, but you are currently speaking with the Oregon State Pee Wee hockey champion of 1997.
I did not know this.
We won state that year. I was 12. And when I tell you that I burned up the NHL 97 cart in my Genesis,
nice,
for years after that, I had my entire real life team built out in that game.
That's awesome.
And I had replaced pretty much the entire Mighty Ducks roster, because that was our team name. We were the Mighty Ducks for like our local house league. And yeah, so like the minute you said NHL 94, I was like, NHL 97 probably logged. It's probably the only game in my Genesis history that logged as many hours as Sonic 2.
NHL 95 is that game for me. I like, everyone's like, oh, what's the game you played the longest? I was like, I always say taking World of Warcraft out of the equation, because that's kind of a cheat code when we're talking about this.
Right.
It's NHL 95 on my Genesis. It was,
Man.
I played hockey growing up. I was a goalie.
Nice.
And it was
I played right
my
side.
Nice.
Yeah.
My dream was to play in the NHL. That's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to be a hockey player growing up. And when I was 16, the day before nationals, we were about to go to Oklahoma City for nationals. I fell and broke my ankle, and I couldn't walk for 9 months. And that was when the dream died. But that was also when I had probably about 1,000 of the 3,000 hours I played on that game logged, was that year, just not being able to move. But it was like there's just something special about stuff like that, where it's those games are just these touchstone moments in our lives, where it's like people look at it like it's a sports game. I'm like, yeah, but it's the best sports game ever.
Yeah. It's weird that, because there's so much nostalgia wrapped up in this retro gaming thing that we do, right?
Yep.
Because I would honestly, to call myself a collector would be an embarrassment to real collectors. I'm the DJ for the Retro Gaming Expo, and I'm sort of leaning into that side of my personality because that's the side of my personality that I love the most. But part of the reason why I was excited to go to work with the Retro Gaming Expo is because I've never been in a position to be able to collect the way that I wanted to, or to be able to play all of the things that I wanted to. And so that was sort of my way into being around it, and being able to be close to it, because I love it. I just, I made a decision at 14 to be an artist, and all the things that they say about being a starving artist are 100% true. It took me a long time to get to where I am now. And I still can't collect the way I'd like to, and so it's weird that the nostalgia part of this thing that we do, right? It is so personal for each individual person. Everybody has their own thing that they remember that was so impactful for them, and maybe they didn't even know it in the moment. It took years of thinking back and reflecting back to realize, oh no, that was a moment that I'm going to carry with me for a really long time still. And video games were involved.
Yeah.
There was a couple kids in my neighborhood that loved coming over because I had a basketball hoop outside my house, and so a lot of the neighborhood kids would come over and shoot hoops. But there was these two dudes that lived down the street. They were brothers, and they would come over and just destroy me on NBA Jam. And that was some of my really fond memories. My best friend would come over, and it would be the two of us against the two of them, and they would embarrass us every time. But then cut to 20 years later, and I'm hanging out with Tim Kitzrow, and he's in my DJ booth, shouting me out on my own microphone. How does that even happen? How do I tell 10-year-old Jeff, the guy on your video game, you're going to hang out with him later, a lot later, but later.
When we went to Southeast Game Exchange this year in South Carolina, and it was it? I did 7 shows this year. I might be getting them crossed. it was Cleveland. We were in Cleveland.
Okay.
And for Cleveland Gaming Classic, and my friend Chris and I went out to breakfast, and the place we went in, there's Tim Kitzrow and Master Pacina, all the guys from Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to bother him. And Chris is like, not. So Chris calls himself a social murder hornet instead of a social butterfly, and I'm a social groundhog because I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to bother them. They're eating breakfast, Chris. We need to leave them alone. Chris is like, nonsense, Get over here. Let's go talk to him. And halfway through breakfast, I'm sitting there. I'm like, I'm eating breakfast with Johnny Cage right now. Holy crap. I'm eating breakfast with Johnny Cage.
Yeah.
And I've talked to Tim a bunch of times. Being in the Midwest, I'm lucky. I get to go to every show I go to, Tim's at, and he's always so incredibly gracious and so funny, and just he's such a cool dude. Like, it's like, that's the Boom Shakalaka guy. I knew who that is. I can say I know him now. So
You said you did how many shows last year?
7 or 8, I think.
Okay. And how many you planning for this year?
Less. And not necessarily because it was burnout. It was my wife and I and her son were going to Ireland next February for a couple of weeks.
Mm.
So we're kind of socking some money away for that and kind of putting some shows away.
Yeah. That's not gonna
I've
be
got
cheap.
no. I've got Midwest Gaming Classic, which is probably the biggest show of the year I do. That's the only definite one right now.
Mhm.
And then there'll be a couple of other smaller ones I'm talking to folks on, but
Portland.
I would love to get out there. I haven't had a chance to get out there yet. So up until God, 2021,
Not
our
that
20th
I'm
anniversary.
biased or anything. Like
Well, I mean, come on. It's like if you can't call yourself a gamer if you haven't played Super Mario Brothers, I can't call myself a collector if I haven't been to PRGE, right?
I don't know about that, but okay.
It's something I need to knock off the list, right? It's
Yeah.
something I want to do. I've seen videos on it. And I'm like, I've got to get there. And I love the PNW. Like it was, I'd never been past the Mississippi until 2021. Like I'd been exclusively East Coast. In 2021, my wife and I, for our 20th anniversary, took a train trip across the U.S. We went from Chicago to San Francisco, and then up the coast to Seattle. And Seattle has been my number one bucket list dream since I was a kid. The first time I saw Sean Kemp slam dunk a basketball at Key Arena,
Yeah.
saw Pearl Jam perform, listened to Super Unknown. I was like, yes, Seattle is where I need to be. And we spent a week there, and I just like I fell in love with the place. Just absolutely fell in love with the entire region, and everywhere we went, I was just like, I could be here tomorrow and not bat an eye and not be upset whatsoever.
Yeah.
But I'm in Michigan and it's 2 degrees outside, so that's a dream for another day right now.
It is a toasty 20.
I would slap a nun for 20 degrees right now. I'm not lying to you.
Yeah, I'm sure that our viewers / listeners are going to remember the mid-January ice storm that covered like the top half of the entire country in the middle of January. That's what we're in the middle of right now.
Yes.
In fact, this weekend I was supposed to do Fan Expo in Portland. I was supposed to do their after party, and had to cancel the day of because the whole town was covered in ice. And man, I was so bummed. I was so bummed to miss out on that one. But thankfully we don't tend to get these kind of storms in September when we're doing a Retro Gaming Expo here in Portland again this year. So, you know what I think it is? I think it's right back to that same conversation we were having about quantity versus quality. I think that if you're going to do less shows, you should make Portland one of them.
I'll see what I can do. It's definitely on the list. The biggest problem for me with Portland is every year we have a work event.
Yeah.
And the last 2 years, Portland has been the same weekend as my work event. And it's like, we meet once a year. I can't be like, I'm sorry, I can't be there. Like it's,
we did change the date this year. So instead of mid-October, we're actually tail end of September this year.
That's significantly more doable.
Yeah, I would take another look. Like all joking aside, I would take another look because we did change the schedule a little bit for this year compared to past years. Okay. And we're hoping that might be a little bit more accommodating for some folks. Because we do have other people sort of like I say we, like I'm making any of these decisions. I'm just the DJ. But the Portland Retro Gaming Expo is changing up the schedule a little bit and hoping that we can accommodate some more folks that are, mid-October isn't great for everybody. So hopefully those folks will be able to make it this year.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do. I'd like to. It's like no joke. It is the number one show I want to get to that I haven't had a chance to be at yet.
Well, I certainly would love to hang out with you. I know Riggs, Hancock, everybody would love to see you. So, it'd be great to have you out here, man.
I hope I can make it happen. That sounds awesome.
We're getting towards the tail end here. Do you want to plug the YouTube channel or any of your other projects real quick?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, YouTube channel Square Pegs. When I started the channel, I did not know that there was a television show from the 80s called Square Pegs. So if you search Square Pegs and you see Sarah Jessica Parker, I'm the other one. I've got the beard. But yeah, I cover retro and modern gaming. I tend to. My friend Aldo has described my videos as having a conversation by a fire with a friend. So if that sounds like something you'd be into, stop on by. I'd love to have you check the channel out. And I'm everywhere. I'm on YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Threads, Instagram, Facebook. What if there's a social network, I'm there. So
yeah, I'm subscribed. I'm looking forward to future videos from you, man.
Awesome.
And I really, really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Jay.
No problem.
That's going to do it for this episode of the Pick Up and Play podcast. My hugest and most sincerest thank you to Jay from Square Pegs for taking the time to hang out with me on this episode. Of course, if you want to see even more from Jay, you can find that over at patreon.com/DJSwitchPDX. One of the things that I did not expect would come out of this podcast that seems to have already started to form is that I will be releasing episodes weekly. So you can find the next episode on youtube.com/DJSwitchPDX or on Spotify. And those should be going up just about every Friday. So right now the plan is to release brand new episodes every single Friday, starting with the next one. And I hope to see you there.